Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Amoretti, and I'm Assistant Director of our Online Writing Center. And I'm here today with one of our wonderful tutors, Dr. Tanya Hart. Can you say hi, Tanya?
Hi, Tanya. Hi,
Hi,
Emmy. Hi,
Tanya.
everybody. Hi, everything.
So I'm always thrilled to work with Tanya, and this is a really special webinar for both of us. So during this webinar, we're going to talk about reflecting on a local context. An essential part of lobbying and advocating for positive social change is grounding that narrative in local context or local circumstances. So in this webinar, we're going to explore how to write about a local context in APA style, using NTRO 120's Week 6 Assignment 2, Food Insecurity FAQ and Reflection as an example. Keep in mind that when we publish the webinar recording, we'll also publish a link to the slide deck for the webinar, and the links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. We've got some really nice resources for you in this webinar, so I hope you'll take advantage of using the PDF to click to them. So here are our learning objectives for the webinar. By the end of the session, we will understand why and how to reflect on local context. Workshop NTRO 120 Week 6 Assignment 2, Food Insecurity FAQ and Reflection, and locate relevant resources and cite them in APA style. I'm going to pass it off to Tanya so we can tackle our learning objective 1.
Thanks so much, Emmy. Okay, let's get this started. First learning objective is to understand why and how to reflect on a local context. So I'm going to be speaking broadly about local context, but I'm going to focus on food insecurity because that is the focus for your class and for this assignment. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I want you to ask yourself, in this internet world where everything is international and 24/7, why is understanding local context so important? Particularly when you're talking about food insecurity. Why is this a big deal? What does understanding food insecurity locally actually mean? I want to back up even further. To go into this, okay, I've got a little bit of background. When I was teaching at University of Kansas, I did have a graduate student who did her doctoral, her thesis, her dissertation on food insecurity. And so when I worked with her, it was just total education. I mean, she just hipped me to so many things that I had taken for granted and just extended to, well, it's just poverty and that's just the way it is. But there's a whole mountain of research and data on this. And so to prep for this class, I went and looked at the World Bank. Okay, because the World Bank was created late 1940s after the United Nations was created, and it's an international funding group that focuses specifically on funding developing nations, helping the poorest nations in the world, increase and protect themselves, protect their people and everything. So the World Bank, they define food security as what occurs when people have adequate economic and physical access to nutritional foods on a regular, ongoing basis. So for the World Bank, having access to nutritional foods, a person having access to money to be able to actually buy food, a person having access to food that's nutritionally relevant for their bodily health, and a person to be able to not fear or stress out over where they're going to have food tomorrow or next week or next month. Those are key aspects of food security. So, food insecurity, what does that mean within a local context? So, insecurity. In 2023, the World Bank declared food insecurity as an ever increasing global problem. It's not something that's going away. Initially, they were concerned in the early 2000s that, okay, food insecurity is rising, especially with global warming. The most, the hottest places in the world where things are really heating up, they're not being able to produce enough food, get enough food to people. People are struggling to afford to have material access to nutritional foods. That was in the early 2000s. And then, bam, something called COVID-19 hit. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't just the poorest nations who were struggling and the poorest people in those nations who were struggling. It was all of a sudden the middle class and the upper class. I remember people were so shocked in the media to hear about food deserts and about a global supply chain. And what do you mean I'm going to not be able to get my tomatoes from all the other side of the world because COVID? And, people aren't flying, or, trucks aren't moving, or trains aren't moving. And oh my goodness. And it was like the wealthier people finally, it started to click in that there is a global supply chain. And how do I get food to the store, to my table? And that's if I can afford to buy the food. If I can't afford to buy the food, and if the food isn't being brought in, yeah, food insecurity. It was like COVID-19 woke up a lot of us. So, lingering post COVID supply chain gaps and increased rates of poverty have combined to explode food insecurity internationally to unprecedented levels. However, as global governments wrestle with food insecurity, more attention needs to be paid to what it means to have food insecurity locally. What does it mean when it's in your home? When you are literally missing meals because you can't afford to buy food? When it's in your neighborhood, your city, or your state? Then food insecurity means lacking the social, the cultural, economic, and the structural means to access nutritious food on a regular basis. So it's not just about internationally, it's not just about them poor, people of color in other countries. It's poor people, people who are struggling right here in the United States. And unfortunately, it hits people of color at a harder level. If we move on to the next slide, why might we reflect on food insecurity in a local context? Why local? Well, first, a local context makes food insecurity real. It makes it personal. It's not just photos of people starving in foreign countries. It's right in our neighborhoods. It's not just data. It's real when we look at it locally. Second, if we look at it from a local context, it becomes educational. It becomes something that you can live. If you don't deal with food insecurity and you've never dealt with it, you can get in your car or you can get on a bus. You can go to 10, 15, 20 minutes away to the other side of town. And you can experience areas and talk to people and see what it's like to be food insecure. And of course, if you're one of those people living with food insecurity, you don't have to take a field trip. You know you're dealing with it. Finally, local context. It's humbling, but it's also empowering to see what's reflected internationally, not just on, a cable news show, but to see it in your own home, in your own neighborhood, your own city or state. It means the problem isn't just gazillions of miles away. It's not on the other side of the world. It is local, it's personal, it's real. And that conception, that realization means that people can be educated and energized and empowered to make critical changes in their lives to fight against food insecurity at local levels. So, how do you reflect on food insecurity at a local context? What does it mean to think and then do? Well, first, I don't think we should be ashamed of being food insecure. This is something that I saw during COVID-19 when people had to suddenly deal with the whole notion of, I don't have food, the food's not in the store, how do I get it? Food insecure. Don't be ashamed. Realize you're not alone. We are not alone in this. We need to get together with other people and work to support and educate and organize to bring about change. So that's first. Second, don't look down on people dealing with food insecurity. Again, going back to COVID-19, when it becomes you and your family, you're less you're less prone to look down on other people. All of a sudden it makes sense. So this isn't fake, and it's not something that's just people are just unfortunate and that's how it is. Food insecurity is systemic. If you go to an inner city and you're seeing liquor stores and you're seeing convenience stores, but you're not seeing a place where you can buy fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, that's systemic. There are bigger issues going on there. So this is real and it's spreading. Same thing in rural areas now. There are food deserts that are cropping up in rural areas. It's not the way it's supposed to be. So this isn't just happening in poorer countries, it's happening right in our cities, and many families are just one job loss or even one death in a family away from food insecurity. So this is real. Learning to make global changes on a smaller local scale is important. It's not just nations dealing with the World Bank and funding and trying to do things internationally. We need to look on smaller local scales and consider local context and the power that people can bring about when they come together and they support, educate, and organize to challenge and alleviate food insecurity. So going on to nutrition and wellness, learning objective 2. This is NTRO 120, week 6, assignment 2, food insecurity, FAQs and reflection. And I think this is one of the cooler assignments that I've seen in quite a while. Actually, I really got into this.
Me
Now,
too.
with
Totally agree.
the application, so we've got the link with this. You can go right straight to Canvas, to the application and see what's called for. So let's just move on to the preamble. And again, this is important. This is getting down to humanity. The purpose, quote, it's important for all of us as responsible human beings to be aware of the problem and food insecurity. We need to understand how pervasive it really is and to be sensitive to this and to do what we can to help. Period. End of quote. I mean, you can't get any more clearer, I think, than this preamble to this assignment. This is for all human beings. You can't, you know, get away from it because I've got money. I don't have to worry about it. No, this is for everybody to consider. Now, in terms of the assignment instructions, this is really cool. What your instructor is asking you to do is, again, make this personal. Okay, so you guys are in nutrition and wellness. This is cool. You're learning about the body, you're learning about nutrition, you're learning about wellness. Now, pass this on to the next generation. So, instructions. Imagine you work with a local food bank in your area. So again, this is local context, not another country. This is take it to your area where you live. You work with a local food bank. You then set up a visit with a local school to have their 5th and 6th grade students visit the food bank and volunteer as part of a field trip. Prior to their trip, the school asks you to do an education session with these students so they can understand why your organization exists and the consequences of food insecurity in their own community. So, step into this, your own area. Imagine you're working with a local food bank. You're going to work with fifth and sixth grade students as volunteers, but you're going to first tell them and educate them to help them understand why the organization has to exist and what food insecurity means. And realize that some of these students may be dealing with food insecurity their own selves. Okay. As you prepare for this presentation, you decide to create a handout. One part of the handout, FAQs. The other part of the handout is an information sheet telling the story, the impact, and the consequences of food insecurity. So let's jump into the FAQ component. So for the FAQs, you have to include at least the following questions, and you've got 6 questions there. So first, what is meant by food insecurity? That's basic. You have to define what you're talking about. Second, how does food insecurity in the US compare to other parts of the world? Again, this is what we've been talking about earlier with the World Bank. It's on the rise, it's exploding. How did that data compare to what's going on in the United States? Third, what are some ways that human behavior contributes to food insecurity? Hmm? Fourth, what's the major cause of chronic hunger? Fifth, what are some things that these children, these fifth and sixth graders, can do to help with food insecurity so that they're not just feeling like, they're pawns. This is just something that their parents go through, that they have to go through, and that's just it. That they are actors in this situation. And then finally, six, in addition to the questions below, you have to create 5 questions of your own that you would like to address. So there are 5 questions here that you're already given, but the sixth is you got to come up with 5 yourself. 5 questions that you're given, at least 5 of the following, and then 5 questions that you have to make up on your own equals a base of 10 questions. So at least 5 of the following questions, you're giving the questions, but then you have to create 5 questions of your own that you would like to address. And when you come up with the questions, of course, you have to come up with the answers as well for your FAQs. Format your FAQ sheet to look like a handout appropriate for 5th and 6th grade students. So you're not dealing with fellow students of your own age, your own criteria. You're dealing with children. How can you verbalize? How can you give them this information on a level that they can handle? They're becoming actors. You're training them. Make sure that you have written your answers so that these students will be able to understand what you're sharing with them. And then the FAQ sheet can't be any more than 2 pages. So at least 10 questions, 5 of which you come up on your own. You can't have any more than 2 pages, and make the questions and the answers at a level that 5th and 6th grade students will be able to understand them. Now, let's move on to the informational component. You've got a base of 250 to 400 words to work within to explain the impact of food insecurity in your own community. Okay. So you got to discuss food insecurity isn't something that's just far away. Those poor people in that other country, Lord, help them get it together. No, you're talking about what's happening within your own community, next door, or even with friends in school. Keep in mind these children themselves may be experiencing food insecurity. Contextualize this to explain why your food bank and your nonprofit is existing. Why is there this need? Moving on in terms of the informational component that you need to do as you do your reflection, think about and address the following. First, my Lord, what are the consequences of food insecurity on someone's quality of life? Now, this is something that everybody, even the most self-secure person, probably needs to think about and can, jam in on. Quality of life. We're all about having good quality of life. So what happens when you're food insecure? What happens when you don't know where your meal tomorrow is coming from, or the next day, or next week? What does that do to your quality of life? In the context of everything that you've learned so far in nutrition and wellness, why is food insecurity so important and so concerning? What does it do to quality of life? Second, what's the likelihood that food insecurity exists within the school that these fifth and sixth graders are attending? What's the likelihood that they may be living through it on a daily basis? What should students be thinking about and responding to? How can they become more sensitive to this reality? Third, if the students are supposed to become more sensitive and responsive to this reality, then what is the community's responsibility where you live to address food insecurity? If you're talking to fifth and sixth graders, what does this mean for the adults in the community? And then finally, how can these fifth and sixth graders address hunger and food insecurity on their own? How can they become actors in this situation? Now, in terms of the informational component, format it as part of the FAQ handout, or you can do it as an add-on to the 1 to 2 page report along with the FAQ sheet. And include a reference page for everything that you formatted. You're going to have to format it according to APA guidelines. I'll quickly run through the assignment rubric. The first part of it is equal. 10 points for the student accurately providing an FAQ question and answer on what it means for food insecurity. The student accurately provides an FAQ question and answer. What is food insecurity in the US compared to other parts of the world? Accurately provides an FAQ question and answer on what are some ways that the human behavior contributes to food insecurity. Student accurately provides FAQ question and answer on what's the major cause of chronic hunger. And then finally, student provides an FAQ question and answer on what are some things that they, as fifth or sixth graders, can do to help with food insecurity. Now, the ante goes up with the following. The student accurately provides at least 5 additional FAQs, question and answers. That's for 50 points. So that means you're really stepping out. You're making it personal. You're thinking about it. You see the questions that you've been given to use. You're going to come up with 5, at least 5 additional ones that are really good and solid on your own. That's worth 50 points. 10 points for the FAQ sheet is no longer than 2 pages in length. You've already been told it can't be any longer than that, and reflects the format that works for school students, for fifth and sixth graders. And then finally, 25 points for student provides appropriate reflection about food insecurity, the impact on the local community, and how students can do more to address it in 250 to 400 words. So that's what's going on with this. Again, get involved. Come up with those at least 5 additional FAQs, the questions and answers, and be able to show that you've thought about this. You've thought about food insecurity, the impact to the local community, and how students can address this in no more than the 250 to 400 words that you're given. And this is going to have three elements required for this assignment. First, you've got your FAQ, which is not any more than 2 pages, so you've got a 1 to 2 page FAQ. You've got the reflection piece, which is 250 to 400 words. You can do it separate, you can do it part of the FAQ, but you've got a word limit that you have to focus on. And then, of course, you have to APA format all of the references that you're going to be using. So, in terms of formatting tips for the FAQ, keep it simple. Keep it simple. This is fifth and sixth graders. Write the questions in a bold, larger font to make them stand out. Keep them clear, age-appropriate language. You want to give them things that fifth and sixth graders can see, they can vibe with, they understand, they see how they can be actors, they see how they can use it, okay? Second, for the FAQs, as you add your original questions, group the related questions together. In terms of definitions, group those together. Statistics, make it simple, but group those together. The factors that affect food insecurity, group them together. How students can become actors, how the students can help, what they can do, group those things together. And then finally, make your handout look nice. Make it look like some a fifth grade. Well, hey, a fifth or sixth grader would want to, hand out to somebody else and say, hey, look what I learned. Make it colorful, use colorful headers, bullet point, bullet point, so they can see. And then you're making this relevant. Again, this is something they may be living through. They may understand totally, but make it fun. And I will hand it back over to Emmy.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm excited that a lot of what you just talked about is going to feed into what we get ready to talk about now. So we're going to talk about tips for targeting a younger audience in your FAQ. So fifth and sixth graders happens to be an age group that I used to teach a long time ago. And I said, please, Tanya, let me talk about the kids. So she said, yes, you can. That's fine.
Please do. Yeah,
So we're going to
please
go over
do.
some strategies to ensure your FAQ matches the needs of that audience. Tanya mentioned using simple language. So we want to avoid jargon and complex terms. For instance, please do not write food insecurity is a social and economic condition characterized by limited or uncertain access to adequate and nutritious food. Those are too many big words. Make them able to understand it. Food insecurity means not having enough food to eat or knowing where your next meal will come from. It affects people of all ages. That
Mhm.
language is simple and clear, and they can understand themselves. I've been hungry. Um, I don't know when I'm going to eat again. So they can apply that to the meaning of this. You can also write your FAQ with a friendly and conversational tone, as if you're speaking directly to the students. Did you know, blah, blah, blah. You can help by blah, blah, blah. That's going to make them engage more with your writing. In addition to using accessible and age-appropriate language, something that you can do is define concepts on their terms. That means connect it to what they know. So here's an example based on where I live. 21.2% of children in Florence County experience food insecurity. That's from Feeding America, ND. This means that 4 children in a class of 20 may not know if they will have enough food to eat when they get home from school or on days when they don't go to school. So here, instead of just giving them numbers, which could be very abstract, I gave a real meaning to that number. If your class has 20 children in it, 4 of them or 5 of them. Did I do the math
Mhm.
wrong? I did do the math
That's
wrong.
okay.
Should be 5 children. Darn it, I've been doing too much math with my son and not paying attention. I can't remember regular
Algebra will
percentages.
get you every time.
No, it is 4. 20 out of 100 would be 1/5, and 1/5 of 20 is
Yes,
4. Never
four.
mind. Just ignore me. Well, don't ignore me. Ignore my math confusion. This is the comic relief from our webinar. Sorry. Okay, so for
Bottom
children
line, a
in
lot of
20,
kids are struggling.
exactly. So 1/5 of them, 4 out of 20, would not know if they had enough food to eat when they got home. This makes it relatable. Maybe they are one of those 4 children, or maybe they can think 4 children in my class might not have food when they get home tonight, and it makes them internalize it and relate it to their own world. You'll notice that I did briefly cite the statistic here. I have that it's from Feeding America. 5th and 6th graders are smart, and they are mature enough to want a little bit of evidence to back up your claims. There are going to be some 11 and 12, 10, 11, 12-year-olds who you tell them 21.2% of children in the county where we live don't have food, and they're going to want to know, where'd you get that information? So while you don't need to apply full APA format in your FAQ, because that could be a little bit overwhelming to 5th and 6th graders, if you have a statistic from an organization that you can easily name, like Feeding America, the United Nations, UNICEF, it's quite possible they've heard of these organizations and you could name them as the source for a specific statistic in your FAQ in a very simple, straightforward way. Here's another example that actually relates to something going on right now where I live. Um, the IGA, which is a grocery store on 5th Street, is closing, and the nearest grocery store is a 20-minute drive away. How do you think
Hmm.
this will affect people in Pamplico when it comes to getting food? Um, so if I were talking to the 5th and 6th graders I used to teach, a lot of them used to live on that side of town. They would have known that this IGA is closing. So referring to their geography and the people around them will help make this concept of a potential food desert more understandable. Where are these people going to go get food now if they don't have a car to drive 20 minutes away? The only thing left there is like a little convenience store where everything's overpriced. And can they even manage to get to the convenience store? So it's going to get them thinking about
Yeah.
that idea. And third, we're taking kind of a fun twist on it. Try to pull in pop culture in a way that could pique their interest in a different way. It makes it relatable in a different way. So during her 2023 to 2024 Eras Tour, Taylor Swift has donated hundreds of thousands of meals to food banks around the world. Basically, during this tour, as she goes around, she has been doing food bank donations at all the stops on her tour. And Taylor Swift is popular. Kids might know who she is or like her music. So mentioning her and her work might grab their attention. If you know that a particular group of students um, we're very interested in certain celebrities or athletes who also often do a lot of community service work, you could mention them in the FAQ to show that they have donated or volunteered to fight food insecurity. Um, at the part where you're saying, what can they do? Look, these people that you know and respect and talk about all the time have done this, so you can follow in their footsteps. And it just makes it relatable by making their ears perk up too. Oh, Taylor Swift, how exciting. So a final thought for communicating with your younger audience is that at the bottom, after your questions, you could invite them to ask questions back. If you have questions about food insecurity or our food bank, please feel free to ask us or your teacher. We're here to help you learn more and make a difference. This language makes it clear that you want them to think about this and engage and not just be bystanders that are coming on a field trip to see what's going on at your facility.
Hmm.
And Tanya mentioned it's important to pass this attitude of helping down to the next generation. So that's why pulling them in like that is a good strategy at the end. So that's your FAQ formatting tips. We also have some for the reflection because the approach to the reflection is a little bit different. Your FAQ is targeted to 5th and 6th graders. The reflection you can be a little more complex in because you can create it as a separate document or you can add it to your FAQ. For example, if you do pages 1 and 2 and you have half a page left on the bottom of page 2, you could box your reflection in there. And I'm thinking about this kind of like maybe you give the kids who come on the field trip this to take home, and maybe that more complicated answer is something that their parents would read when they brought it home with them, or that their teachers could read as they
Great
explain more
idea.
about it to them in the class. So you can target this more toward adults, but don't get too complicated. We want everyone to be able to understand what you're saying, because again, we're talking about inspiring community togetherness. Tanya said this will be 250 to 400 words. If you're conceiving this as a separate document, that would be 1 or 1.5 double space pages. If you want to put it in your FAQ, put it in a box, single space it, whatever, as long as it looks pretty in the context of the overall FAQ. You do want to write it in paragraph form. And here we do suggest you use in-text citations for very important ideas informed by sources. Remember, you're going to have a references list attached to that. So you want to show where statistics especially are coming from. Because they've given you really detailed questions to answer in the reflection, you could use the strategy of turning each question group into a paragraph to organize it, and then using each question to make it sentence starter. For instance, this is the first question set on the left of the slide. What are the consequences of food insecurity on someone's quality of life? And in the context of everything you have learned thus far, why is food insecurity so concerning? I could write a paragraph based on those questions, and I could rewrite each question into a sentence stem or a topic sentence. So what are the consequences of food insecurity on someone's quality of life? I could write, food insecurity negatively affects a person's quality of life. And then I could give examples of the way that it has that negative impact. Second question, in the context of everything you've learned thus far, why is food insecurity so concerning? Food security insecurity is concerning because blank, and then go on and fill out that paragraph. Remember, you've got, I think there are 5 questions posed here, 4 or 5, and you only have a page, page and a half. So you don't have to go into great detail as you answer the questions, but you do need to make sure you answer them in a way that, well, the instructor can tell that you've addressed all of the points. So our third component is to locate relevant resources and cite them in APA style. We're going to talk some more about APA style because of the references page and how you might want to cite your very important points. And we're also going to talk about some up-to-date resources that you may want to use to gather data. So I saw that the textbook for the course includes some information on food insecurity in the world and in the United States, but their statistics seem to be about 10 years old. So if you're interested in finding more recent data regarding food insecurity worldwide, you may want to check out this extremely comprehensive report from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. You can access this report by clicking the DOE link here in our PDF, or you could just Google State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, United Nations, and it'll pull it up. Several organizations collaborated on this report, as you can see from the extensive author list in our APA style reference. That's why it has so much great information. Hint, I did give you the APA reference here if you want to copy this from our PDF and put it into your references list. That would be A-OK. And at the bottom, I've also shown you how to cite it. So technically, I always find this interesting. This is technically a work with multiple authors, but the organizations are the multiple authors. So you would still use this APA format of first author plus et al. You would put the name of the first organization and follow it by et al. With a period after all. Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations et al. Period, comma, 2022. So that's if you want to use this, how you could cite and reference it in your work. So the 2 sources I shared on this slide give you opportunities to get up-to-date data on food insecurity in the United States. The previous report was about the world. These are about the United States. The first is from the website from a really neat organization called Feeding America. This is linked in your course resources as well. And we'll talk more about this website in a minute. And the second one is a U.S. government report by Rabbit et al., Household Food Security in the United States in 2023. Again, both of these resources are accessible at the links we have here, and I have given you the references in APA format if you would like to use them. So I mentioned we were going to look some more at Feeding America. This is related to a different page than I linked you to on the different page. This is from Map the Meal Gap. And it can give you information on your local context, specifically at the state and county level. And I made a little video to show you what happens if you navigate to Feeding America's Map the Meal Gap page. They have an interactive map of the meal gap. You scroll down to the bottom. You can go to where your state is and hover over it. And for instance, South Carolina has 12.8% rate of food insecurity overall, which is 678,710 people. But if I click on my state, it's going to take me down to the county level. And I can see that Florence County has 12.3% food insecurity rate for a population of 16,910 overall. If I go up to the drop-down list, I can break it down by age and race and ethnicity. 21.2% of children in Florence County, which is 6,810, experience food insecurity. Looking at the different races and ethnicities is very eye-opening. We have in Florence 26% food insecurity among the Black population, and among the white non-Hispanic population, we only have 9% food insecurity. So looking at statistics like this really helps you see disparities in how the populations are affected. And it didn't have information on our Latino and Asian populations, but looking at the Black versus white, that reflects a lot of what you're going to see in the literature, that our people of color have a higher rate of food insecurity. So that's a really useful resource, and it's kind of fun to click through if you like interactive maps. So I encourage you to visit it. So let's talk about how to cite an organizational web page using that Map the Meal Gap page, because again, it's really useful and I hope all of you use it. So we'll format this according to the APA reference format for an organizational web page. That means that the organization is the author, and you can follow this format to write most any reference for a page on an organizational website. So I've got the name of the organization, Feeding America, in the author position. The N period, D period in parentheses means that the article or the page itself wasn't labeled with a specific date. On an organizational website, please don't use the copyright date at the bottom of the page as the date. If the content isn't specifically dated, that's when you use ND for no date. The title for the web page, here Map the Meal Gap, is formatted in sentence case, which means we capitalize the first letter of the title. And if there were a subtitle or any proper nouns, we would also capitalize them, just like if the title were written as a sentence in your paper. Sentence case is also applied to the titles of journal articles, books, reports, and videos in APA references, which we'll see over the next couple of slides. For the source information, you do not need to include the name of the website for an organizational web page, because the website name is usually the name of the organization itself. And per APA guidelines, we don't need to repeat it. Last, we have the URL, which begins with https://. Then to name the source in our text, we follow APA's author date format. We can put the organization name, comma, ND in parentheses at the end of the sentence with the borrowed idea. In 2022, 21.2% of children in Florence County, South Carolina experienced food insecurity. We could also put it as a narrative citation. According to Feeding America ND, 16,910 residents of Florence County, South Carolina, or 12.3% of the population, were food insecure in 2022. So you'll notice that as I'm writing statistics in APA, I'm using numerals and I'm using the percent sign, 21.2%. For large numbers, 10 and above, we're going to use numerals. So I have 16,910 residents of Florence County. This is an APA guideline, so you don't want to use number words. You want to use numerals in these circumstances to share your data. Here is an example of how to cite an online news article if you want to talk about Taylor Swift, or if you want to talk about local statistics or matters related to food insecurity. That example that I had about the grocery store where I live, I actually saw it in a news article and decided to pull it in. So if you had something like that in your FAQ, you would want to put that article on your references page. So for an online news article, this one's a signed article, so it has a specific author. We are going to put the author's name, last name, comma, first initial and middle initial if they had their middle initial available. Then for a news article or a web article, you put the most specific date that you have. So we have the year, comma, the month and the day, 2024, comma, August 25th. Then we have the title and sentence case. So we have the D capitalized and we have the T and the S in Taylor Swift capitalized because Taylor Swift's name is a proper noun. For the source, she's a proper noun. For the source, we have the name of the news website, which in this case, this is from the Associated Press. And then the source is followed by the URL, again, preceded with https://. To cite in your reflection, you can use the author's last name and the year, separated by a comma at the end of a paraphrase sentence. Again, if you're writing an FAQ for 5th and 6th graders, if you put Beasley said, that's not going to have much meaning for them. So in your FAQ, I would stick to naming organizations if you're going to provide a citation. The assignment doesn't say that you have to have APA format in that FAQ. But my thought for the reflection also is that you keep the citations in parentheses unless you're referring to an organization, especially if you're considering the reflection at the bottom as part of your FAQ. This is again because even if you send this home with your students who come visit you or give it to your teachers, they're not going to know who Beasley is. That's not going to be authoritative to them. They might recognize an organization name in your text, but I would keep the citations in parentheses just to kind of give them more information if they want, but Beasley doesn't mean anything to them. Use the parenthetical citation. If you do want to use a narrative citation here or in the future, here's a reminder of how you do it. Beasley, the author's name in parentheses, followed by, Beasley's name in the sentence, followed by the year in parentheses, so Beasley 2024. Observe that food insecurity has increased since the COVID pandemic, making donations to food banks even more important. That was how Beasley contextualized Taylor Swift's food bank donations on her Eras tour. Last, you may, of course, want to cite your textbook, which is a whole authored book. So let's look at how to reference it. A whole authored book means that the same author or set of authors wrote the book. So here we're going to use those authors' names in the author portion of the reference. Thompson, J.J., and Manore, M. For multiple authors, we separate their names with commas, and we use an ampersand before the last author's name. So we've got Thompson, J.J., comma, ampersand, Manore, M. We use that comma and the ampersand even if there are only 2 authors in your APA reference. The date for the textbook will just be the year in parentheses, followed by the title in sentence case. And this time the first word of the title and the first word of the subtitle are capitalized. So we have N in nutrition and A in An capitalized. The book has edition information, so we put 5th ed period in parentheses after the title, and then at the end we put the name of the publisher. For the in-text citations, again, you can cite with the author's last names connected by an ampersand in parentheses with a comma and then the year, Thompson and Manore, comma, 2018 in parentheses. Again, I encourage you to stick with parenthetical citations in your reflection because the names in text could be distracting instead of clarifying. But In the future, or if you really want to name them in your sentence, you can write out the word "and" to connect the names of two authors. Thompson, A.N.D., Minore, parentheses 2018, explained. So this brings us to the end of our webinar, which I feel was really full of excellent information and thoughts. Today we use several examples to understand why and how to reflect on local context. Workshop NTRO 120, Week 6, Assignment 2, Food Insecurity FAQ and Reflection, and locate relevant resources and cite them in APA style. Before we conclude, we'll take a minute to tell you more about the services that we offer at the Online Writing Center. You can check out our new Online Writing Center group in My ACU. You can watch the video linked on the second line for steps to make an appointment and submit your paper. We work with you at any stage of your writing, and we offer two types of appointments on our schedule. The first is an email/asynchronous appointment where you upload your paper and the tutor will send you feedback by email within 24 hours of the appointment time. That's usually labeled the Writing Center report. This means if your appointment is at 10 a.m. on a Friday, you'll get feedback by 10 a.m. on Saturday. For a Zoom appointment, you go to the schedule at the time of the appointment and click on the Zoom link. The times are in Central Time, and then you will get to talk with a tutor one-on-one. You can also access many writing-related resources on our Online Writing Center website. To submit your work to an appointment, you just go to WC Online where you schedule the appointment and you upload your paper to the appointment form. When you make the appointment, you don't have to have your paper ready to upload yet. You can make your appointment 2 weeks ahead of time. And if your appointment's for 10 a.m. Friday, you can upload your paper at 9:59 a.m. Friday and it will be good to go. You can contact us if you have any questions about this webinar or citing and referencing different sources or locating resources. Email us at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. The second link lets you schedule an appointment, and the third link takes you to our Online Writing Center website, where again, we have tons of resources, including our APA course paper template, which can help you set up APA. That's not necessarily, it'll help you with your references for this part. We have references available as part of the template, so it could help you with your formatting there. We have a YouTube channel where our videos are available, our webinar videos. And we have our Online Writing Center blog where we have tutors sharing their thoughts about different writing related concepts. Other webinars that you might be interested in if you tuned into this one are our Presenting to Younger Audiences webinar and our Strategies for Successful College Writing. The slides and the videos for those are both linked here. And now we have come to the end of our Reflecting on a Local Context webinar. We thank you all for learning with us today. And Tanya, thank you so much for helping us and working with me on this, because working with you is always a joy, even when I
Oh,
can't do
thank you,
math.
Emmy. That's okay, girl. You're a rock star. Rock stars don't have to do math. I just hope that all of you students get a lot out of this assignment because this is a situation that's not going away. So really, really dig into this and get a lot out of it. All the best to you.
And take to heart the idea of sharing it with those younger than ourselves so that they keep an eye on it too.
That next generation.
Yes. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.